Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. This week, my body is sore. In addition to today being leg day, I've recently been doing a lot of hiking in the area. And let me tell you, my body is tired. There was not a lot of elevation or hills or anything like that in Texas for the longest time, even though I know they say that I lived in the hill country, but I'm from the mountains, so I guess I have a different colloquial understanding of hills than they perhaps do there. So whenever people would ask me in Texas if I wanted to go for a hike, they really, in my book, meant just a walk, like a leisurely stroll, because a lot of those paths were paved, for one, or they were made with sidewalk and stuff, sidewalk material, concrete, etc. Asphalt, some of them, it just depended, but they were not just gravel types of paths. A lot of them were paved, not all of them. But we would go on these trips, and not only were they often paved, but they were also often very flat. I am used to changes in elevation when I hike because of where I grew up. So, again, that's a me problem, not a them problem. But I'm used to just going for walks now, mostly, for the past several years, except for when I'm in the pool or on the elliptical and stuff. But going out and hiking here, back home, has been a lot. So I'm engaging a lot more muscles than I normally would have on one of my Texas hikes. And I'm very excited about it. I cannot wait to see the gains from all of this. But with gains also comes quite a bit of soreness. So for today, I want to talk to you guys about Epsom salt. We're going to talk about what they are and what we can use them for in health and wellness, as well as how effective they really are. Also, stick around to the end, and I will regale you with my review of how reaching out to telemedicine went for me this past week. I'm very excited to share that with you all too, as it was definitely a new experience for me, and I think I might be able to answer a lot of questions for y'all that I had as a newbie going in. First up though, what the heck is Epsom salt? Can you eat it? Can you put it in your mouth? I remember my mom always telling me, don't eat the Epsom salt. And a lot of times it was scented, so it tasted terrible. It tasted like soap. So she didn't have to really fight me on that one. But we're going to talk about what it is. Epsom salt is often referred to as Epsom salts. So we're going to break that down too. But these salts are magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. A lot of times you will just see that written as magnesium sulfate on the bottle or the bag. They originally made this material by boiling down mineral water at Epsom, England. As that water boiled off and left primarily the minerals, they were able to get that magnesium sulfate. And it's considered to be the active ingredient, magnesium specifically, when it comes to Epsom salts. They also generally refer to it as Epsom salts instead of salt, and that's just from tradition. There's not really multiple kinds of this salt, it's just the one. So you can say Epsom salts if you want, or you can refer to it as Epsom salt. Either way, it's technically correct. Kind of like octopuses instead of octopi. Technically, it would be octopodes or octopuses, even though a lot of us grew up with octopi, and it sounds better in general. It sounds more comfortable to our ear, but part of it is just tradition. You're technically correct if you refer to it as octopuses, because when you bring a word into the English language, it gets pluralized typically with the English rules, which would make it octopuses. And then octopi actually has mixed Latin and Greek root terms, or the prefix and the suffix. And so that ends up being kind of problematic, like the term polyamory, where it's mixed Latin and Greek as well. So technically, if we were to keep it within the same language, the plural would be octopodes. So the 8 and then the arms/legs. So octopodes and octopuses are technically correct, but octopi is so deeply ingrained traditionally in American colloquial vernaculars that you could probably still get away with saying octopi, and really most people would still likely agree with you. So you can use Epsom salts or Epsom salt. Kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's one of my favorite bits of trivia I wanted to share with you guys while it was relevant. But that's the TLDR of Epsom salt. It's really pretty much just magnesium sulfate. They do come in crystals. They're these cute little clear crystals, clearish, and it's just magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. And then it's just the salts, and then you put it back in water when you're ready to help out those sore muscles and take a bath. Now, there's really not actually a ton of studies on the effects of Epsom salt and body pain, though. Now, I do use it in my bath water. I usually use Dr. Teal's, and it has like lavender in one of them and eucalyptus and spearmint in another, and I think I have one that smells like gingerbread cookies or something that someone gave me. It just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Am I feeling Christmassy, which I can do any time of year, thank you, then I'll go ahead and put in my gingerbread one. Or if I am having trouble sleeping, I might use the lavender one. Or if my muscles are sore, then the eucalyptus and spearmint might be more of my go-to. But that's just kind of almost the same as essential oils. They're very similar in that manner. And you could probably put essential oils in your bath water too. I'm not sure. I don't use those. But my point is that these are just the associations that I have with them. Lavender being sleepy, and using eucalyptus and spearmint to be soothing. Or if I have a respiratory cold and I'm not feeling well, then I might use that then too, to help kind of steam some of the cough and some of the snot out of my sinuses and in my chest. So for me, I just have these correlations in my mind, right? But I was really curious this week, if I'm using these things, does that really work, or is it just kind of a placebo effect because I have these other associations that are shared with things like essential oils? So there are not that many studies, though, of how effective it is on body pain. There might never be. A lot of times, scientific researchers, tend to not follow up on a lot of folk remedies. However, we may see more of that as we are seeing a rise in alternative and complementary medicine, complementary and alternative medicine, CAM, as we are also seeing a rise in a field called medical anthropology. So you may not have heard of medical anthropology before. I hadn't until I went to graduate school and someone was majoring in medical anthropology or specializing in it. We were all in the same anthropology program, but I was expecting the four-field approach, like a linguistic, a cultural, an archaeology, and a biological anthropology subfield, having four. Those are the main four, and those are the ones that are considered to be a really holistic four-field approach in learning anthropology. And I had taken classes in each of them in undergrad. But then there was this new thing called medical anthropology, and one of the girls in my graduate cohort was in it. And it turns out that this relatively new discipline is a subfield that uses the cultural, biological, and linguistic areas of anthropology. So everything but archaeology, for the most part, to really understand what influences health and well-being, what influences how diseases spread, and how they can prevent and treat sickness in different individuals across the entire globe, how different approaches might be needed in different areas for different reasons, and how to predict these things. They also look at the cultural importance of different medical systems. It's a very broad field, a very broad subfield, just like paleoanthropology is underneath biological anthropology, or forensic anthropology is under biological anthropology. If you're familiar with the TV show Bones, that's what I'm talking about. So those are still subfields. And biological anthropology plus archaeology ends up being bioarchaeology, like the folks who study mummies, or also forensic anthropology. Forensic anthropologists use archaeological techniques for excavations in order to recover human remains. So they are doing the biological component of really being experts in the skeleton, but also in the excavation techniques used by archaeologists. So that's how medical anthropology similarly works, where it's a combination of some of these fields in order to form a different subdiscipline. So there's a lot of different subdisciplines, but medical anthropology is more interesting, for the most part, in the realm of health and wellness. So this is a type of discipline that's been growing in the past several years that you may not have heard of if you are not some type of an anthropologist, or haven't been to a conference lately, or been in grad school for the past, 10 years. I didn't know about it before I went to grad school, but that doesn't mean that everyone else didn't. It just means it's new information to me. But I didn't consider it to be colloquially familiar to a lot of folks. And they study some really cool stuff that if you're interested in health and wellness, and you want to know more about the whys and the hows, in addition to some of the whats, then I definitely encourage you to Google this. They study ethnomedicine, they study different cultural practices, they study pharmaceuticals, biotech, medical practices in different contexts throughout time, how culture and history can shape these different practices and shape policies, and how experiences of illness or anything related to health and wellness, pregnancy, etc., may be experienced differently in different cultures. It's very interesting to me, and they study all kinds of stuff. They're a lot more open to studying folk medicines like Epsom salt or essential oils and their efficacy. So they study a whole lot of stuff. They study like medicine itself in many ways, but that's not all that they do. So I know a lot of folks are bummed out, including myself, that there isn't more research in folk medicines and their efficacy. I feel like Epsom salt works for me, but perhaps it only works for me because I feel like it does. I'd just like to see some scientific studies on it too. And I think it would be super cool if those studies validated what I believe to be true, but I'd also be willing to accept it if it turns out it's a placebo effect. That's also fine by me. What matters to me is that it works, after all. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the limited studies in Epsom salt science and also what these Epsom salts are supposed to help rid our bodies of. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Talking about what Epsom salt is, and how there has been a dearth of science related to folk medicines over the past few decades, but how we may see a resurgence in that research as more people become aware of the practice of medical anthropology and more folks start following this life path. So, now that we've covered medical anthropology and the fact that there are few studies on Epsom salt and their reliability on affecting body pain positively, we're going to talk about some other medical uses of Epsom salt. So there are other types of things that your packages of Epsom salts will say that you can use them for. I've seen them seen to be recommended as being used as a laxative. I've never tried that, but I definitely do believe my mother when she says that it's going to make me sick if I eat it, because that's the point. Or perhaps it's just a side effect that became a secondary point. Who's to say? My personal point is that you should probably not eat Epsom salt unless you're trying to use it as a laxative, and also make sure that you have the right kind that you can eat and use as a laxative. You probably should not be ingesting things like eucalyptus. However, some Epsom salts can be used as a laxative. That has been studied in a few different research projects, and it's also FDA approved. They also say that that is the most common and generally known medical usage. So I've actually not ever used it for that purpose. My mom seemed to be more so warning me that it would give me diarrhea because I liked to eat table salt and was just trying to stop me from eating Epsom salt, thinking they were both salts. I do love a good flaky salt, but she wanted to make sure I knew, not that one. She wasn't really seeming to promote it as a laxative. It was more of a warning, like she would say, don't drink bleach, that's very bad, it'll make you sick. So that kind of thing. But this is the most well-known medical usage, so maybe I misunderstood it. I took her notification as a threat or warning, I guess. But there are internal uses of this type of material, and that includes being used to treat irregular heart rhythms, low blood magnesium, eclampsia, and also severe tetanus. So there have been several different studies on this and how effective these are. Now granted, if you have any of those issues I just listed, please go and speak to a doctor about that. I am not at all encouraging you to eat this. As we have covered, I definitely know first and foremost 2 things about Epsom salts. 1, that it will give you diarrhea, and 2, that you can use it to soak your muscles, at least in my experience. But again, that's not scientific knowledge. So as always, if you're going to add anything, including vitamins or minerals, into your health and wellness routine, it's always a good idea to run it by your doctor. Now, there are also some other types of uses of Epsom salts that are widely disputed. Some people try to use it to dissolve gallstones. You should not do that. You guys know I'm also here for, using the naturopath type of medicines a lot of times. I take my probiotics and work hard to just go outside and be in the sun when I'm feeling sad and things like that. So I am paying attention to my vitamin D and all that jazz rather than just going and doing whatever else everybody else does, I guess. You know what I mean. There's nothing wrong with any of those paths that you may choose, whether it's one or the other combinations. But you also do want to make sure that no matter what you trend towards, whether that's naturopathy or whether it's modern medicine, that you're always doing it from an informed place. And so in this case, they say that dissolving gallstones with Epsom salt does not actually work. By all means, use that Epsom salt as labeled as being recommended as such for laxatives. I'm not saying don't use it internally, just that science has studied this area of folk medicine and found that it doesn't dissolve gallstones, but it will help you have a bowel movement. However, it can also cause serious poisoning in your body. Remember, too much of anything can still be a bad thing, and that is also the case with magnesium sulfate. But there's really not anything that's published on aches and pains and using Epsom salt to treat that. It seems, I guess, that people just aren't interested in researching that. It's not really come up for folks, because even if they found that it didn't work, it should still be published, especially if it were scientific journals, because opposing views and data that says contrary to what your hypothesis was, it's still good data because you're looking for facts. You're searching for the truth, not for an agenda. So even if it didn't work, if people were researching it, I would expect to see more about that. So we don't really know. We are Epsom salt agnostic, I suppose. A lot of folks may also just not be able to get that type of research funded. Funding is what makes the world go round, especially in academia. So if Epsom salt doesn't have, big pharma on its side or anything like that, anyone with a vested interest in funding it, anyone whose family members are affected by something that can be treated with this on any huge scale, then a lot of times folks aren't going to fund it. So in the meantime, if you're using those Epsom salt baths, there's not been anything published that says that you shouldn't go ahead and use them. So go for it. I'm going to keep using mine. As it relates to muscle pain, of course. Now, when we say that we're using these for muscle pain, though, what is it really doing? How is that working? How is that any different to have hot water with salt in it versus hot water without salt in it? Well, a lot of times when we talk about Epsom salts, folks say that they are removing toxins from their body. So they are doing a detox, or they're leaching toxins out of their body via osmosis. But really, do they work that way? The answer is not really. So toxins are poisons that are produced by living things. So that means like venom. I suppose, like the superhero as well, but venom in general that like snakes have, or like the toxins on the poison dart frog, or metabolic wastes that you have in your body. A lot of folks refer to all of these as being poisons, but poisons are technically any substance that is harmful, and that can be in large quantities or small ones. You can get hypernatremia, too much water, and essentially get water poisoning. Or you could have the teensiest amount of lead and it be poisonous to your body. It really just depends on the different substances. But substances that you normally wouldn't consider to be harmful to you can be in different quantities, like water. Toxins, on the other hand, are the ones made by living creatures. So the poison dart frog, it's really a toxin that is on its skin. Venom generally means that you have to be able to have an injection mechanism into a creature's body. So, like, snakes have fangs. And there's recently been a new frog species put forth that's argued to have venom because it has some spines in its mouth that the tissues around it recede from when it starts kind of putting its mouth on you, like it's biting you. Now, these aren't teeth, but they also have venom that's associated with them. They have a toxin that's associated with them. And so by these teeth going, or these little bony plates really, going through their skin and then making puncture marks in yours, they're effectively making that toxin a venom because it has an injection method. It's super interesting in my opinion, and if you want to learn more about venomous frogs, I highly recommend Googling it. You can also search it by Greening's frog or Bruno's cask-headed frog. There are several articles about them online, including one from the Natural History Museum in the UK. They found them about 5 years ago or so. That's when the publications came out. But it sounds like a new horror from 2020. Don't worry, it is not. This is a horror we were already familiar with. They are 25 times more poisonous than Brazilian pit vipers, which is remarkable. But for the most part, you are not likely to encounter these species just because of where you live. We have plenty of our own venomous creatures to worry about where each of us are, I reckon. We're gonna go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about the toxins known as metabolic wastes. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Before the break, we were talking about the differences between toxins and poisons and venoms and metabolites. So we're going to talk about metabolic wastes now in the human body, because that's really what folks are referring to when they're talking about toxins in your body being removed by Epsom salt. So metabolic wastes are kind of a fuzzy grouping of molecules. So whenever your cells are performing their biochemical duties, there are a lot of molecules bouncing around in your body and different things happen to them. Technically, they can be considered toxins because they are produced by your body, and if you had a crazy abnormal amount of them, then they could be harmful and thereby be poisonous, just like water. But these are normal products of your body, and most of them are usually excreted through your urine or through your sweat glands or through your bowel movements, etc. They're normally reused or recycled or excreted by these different processes in your body. So just like a lot of nature, you're really not losing a lot on the cellular chemical level. A lot of folks, though, think that lactic acid is what's causing a lot of the problem. However, a lot of folks say it's not a persistent waste product, and you shouldn't want to try to get it out of your muscles, even if we were able to. Additionally, they argue that your skin is waterproof, that it's not able to have osmosis performed on your skin and essentially exchange those Epsom salts on the outside of your body with your internal components. So we kind of have to be waterproof as humans because of how we're built, because otherwise we would shrivel up being outside. We have a lot of water in our bodies, and we do dehydrate quite a bit throughout the day. Remember, if you're feeling thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And make sure if you haven't drank your water today, go ahead and take a big gulp of that right now. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. And we're going to continue with Epsom salts now. So with these salts, you are sweating a bit in a hot bath, right? And you dehydrate when you sweat. But Epsom salts don't seem to really replace that salt in your body that you are losing via your sweat. It's not that kind of salt either, remember? Epsom salt is not like table salt, and it's only referred to as a salt because of its chemical composition. So it's really not a one-for-one type of trade. It's like trying to make an apple pie, but all you have is kiwis. That's not going to be tasting the same. It's not really going to be the same. They're still fruits. We can compare fruits, but at the end of the day, it's not an appropriate or an equivalent exchange. So since we have these different layers of our skin, like we discussed in our skin episode, that epidermis, that top layer, then the dermis, then your subcutaneous fat area, and then your muscle and everything beneath that, then you're not able to get water through that. You have keratin, that's really fibrous protein that is in those dead cells that are at the surface. You have them in your fingernails and your hair too. And so water can't permeate the keratin. So you can't really get all the way through there and get osmotic results of this water versus salt exchange. It's not going to work that way. However, the way that it does work is that when we dissolve that Epsom salt into water, it releases magnesium and sulfate ions, because remember, it's magnesium sulfate. I conducted some research in a few different places for this and still did not find any solid evidence that either magnesium or sulfates are able to be absorbed into your body through the skin. Remember when we talked about deodorants and antiperspirants as well, that the antiperspirants are said to not cause cancer because even though they have aluminum in them, those aluminum salts are only able to really clog up those pores. They're your sweat glands, really. So they're not small enough to be able to get all the way inside of your body and build up to the toxic levels that would be associated with aluminum poisoning or aluminum toxicity or cause anything like breast cancer. And that has also been supported by several of my best friends' doctors who are leading breast cancer researchers and leading breast cancer doctors in the United States, and have assured her as well that there is also no research that is valid showing a significant risk for that. So she's like, you can definitely still use antiperspirants and stuff while she was going through her treatments and everything. Similarly, those aluminum salts and those magnesium sulfates, that Epsom salt, is not going to be able to be absorbed into your body through your skin in this manner. So I guess I'm the odd man out this time. Normally, when I'm Googling these things, I'm like, yes, there's some scientific evidence for this, but not this time. It seems that there hasn't been any evidence really for or against this type of use for Epsom salt for your muscles. Just, we do know that it's definitely not working via osmosis, if that is how you thought that Epsom salt was working. There are different ways that you can measure those chemical compounds and that effectiveness, or know those things about it without having to do all that research. We just know that you cannot absorb Epsom salt osmotically. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work to alleviate sore muscles, just that that is definitely not the mechanism whereby which it works. I would be very interested in a medical anthropology project taking a look at this type of therapeutic use for Epsom salt and whether it does what they say it does, or, if it's all in my head. In the meantime, I'm just gonna keep taking those baths. They make me feel good about me, they make me feel relaxed, and they make my muscles feel better. So for me, it is a self-care triple win. So in this case, for Epsom salt, go ahead, you guys, live your best life. We'll just keep checking in on the research as more medical anthropologists are created academically out there and see if there are more studies on it in the future. The future is unfolding in front of us all the time, and that is one of the exciting components of modern medicine, but also the exciting component of medical anthropology is that it looks both forward and backward, and also, I suppose, laterally as we walk along too. If you are using Epsom salt, though, you can use it for different conditions. A lot of folks don't get enough magnesium, so I might be one of them. So when I've gone to my doctor before, they have prescribed me getting more magnesium because I was having trouble sleeping, and they thought that might be a problem in my nervous system as I wasn't getting enough magnesium and therefore needed that to help with my biochemical reactions with my heart and my nervous system and help me sleep. And magnesium's really important for your body. It is the 4th most abundant mineral in your body, and it's important for over 325 biochemical reactions in your body. So if you do get enough magnesium, you might have some trouble absorbing it appropriately because different things in your body, like dietary phytates and oxalates, can mess with how much of the magnesium your body's actually absorbing. So that's something that we should really be thinking about in our health and wellness journeys as well, is not only are we getting enough of these vitamins and minerals, but how effectively are we absorbing these? Is our body able to absorb it? Do I have enough of these other carrier minerals and stuff that are necessary for this? Do I have too much of something else going on in my body that might be affecting how much is being absorbed? Remember, most of what goes on in the body is either reused and recycled, or it's excreted. So you could be excreting a lot of these vitamins and minerals via your urine, your sweat, your bowel movements, etc., instead of really getting to absorb it. So perhaps I need to sit back down with my doctor and talk about maybe whether my body is just not absorbing enough magnesium, even if I was on the supplements and they did not seem to work. Maybe I was taking enough of them, but I was not absorbing enough of them. So if that makes anything in your health and wellness journey immediately spring to mind, I encourage you to talk to your doctor about that as well. Magnesium sulfate in general is important as a magnesium supplement, and some people think that you can absorb magnesium better with Epsom salt when you put it in your mouth, but they've not had any evidence to support that. It's not necessarily saying it doesn't work, but I can't really think of a reason why that might be more effective. Who knows? Maybe one of these medical anthropologists will study it in the future, but this is really predicated on a study of 19 healthy people that was not published, so it's not been peer-reviewed or anything, but it was performed way back when, and the researchers said that all but 3 of the people who were in the study showed higher blood magnesium levels after soaking in an Epsom salt bath. But they didn't have a control group. They didn't perform any statistical tests either. And it just was mostly them saying, hey, we put these people in bathtubs with Epsom salt, and they had higher blood magnesium levels afterwards. We think it's going to mean that this is more effective to soak in Epsom salt and absorb it into your body than just putting it in your mouth. So again, we actually don't know how that might work. It's definitely not osmotic in nature, and this study was not published or peer-reviewed, and they didn't even do statistics on it or have a control group. So it's not superb scientific methodology, and we should see more studies on this if we're going to go down that route in that belief system. Those conclusions are pretty questionable in my book, and they don't have a lot of scientific grounding that's very solid. We want to build our scientific houses on a rock. We are going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of other uses for Epsom salt that are said to work, and I'm going to tell you guys about my experience with telemedicine and tell you what I wish I had known going into it as well. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
we were talking about how Epsom salt is not absorbed osmotically and how there are different arguments for its uses. Now, we're going to talk about some of the scientifically supported uses, and then we're going to discuss my recent adventure with telemedicine. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes if I can't sleep, I use lavender Epsom salts in a bath to soak in and help me to fall asleep. I also have the milk and honey type if I'm just wanting to soak and treat myself, and a slew of other types. It's like my main self-care kit, to be honest. I'm not even sure if it actually works, but it makes me feel nice, and that's the point of self-care, right? Otherwise, I'm just in a regular bathtub. It makes it feel fancy when I put the Epsom salts in there, and even if it's just mostly the scents that are helping evoke that quality of feeling relaxed. It works for me. And I have used it also without the scents before, and it seemed to work pretty well that way too. So they do help me to feel sleepy and less stressed. My lavender one and my milk and honey one and also my eucalyptus one for the most part. And they have found that adequate magnesium levels are really important for sleeping and for stress management, which is why my doctor first recommended that when I told her that I was anxious and was struggling with insomnia. And they think that this works this way because magnesium can help your brain to create those neurotransmitters that help you to fall asleep, as well as those that reduce the amount of stress that you are under or that you are experiencing and responding to. So magnesium helps your body produce melatonin, they think, and at this point, I think a lot of us are probably familiar with melatonin. We've talked about it a lot, but it is that sleep hormone. So you can take it in pill form as well and go to bed if that's something that works well for you, or that's something that you may be lacking levels of in your body. Definitely talk to your doctor about it if you're interested. Low magnesium levels can increase stress and reduce the amount of sleep you're getting, which can in turn also lead to more stress. It's pretty much a positive feedback cycle there. But taking Epsom salts are thought by some folks to reverse those issues by allowing you to absorb it through the skin. As we covered, you can't really osmotically absorb Epsom salt or that magnesium sulfate in any meaningful quantities at all through the skin. So it's probably those hot baths that are doing that for us. But hey, if taking a hot bath with or without Epsom salt is helping reduce your stress and get you more sleep, by all means, carry on. They also see that it is useful for treating constipation, and they say it's because it draws water into your colon. There have been research studies on this, and drawing that water to your colon is something that's really helpful for promoting bowel movements. Folks tend to take that magnesium by mouth for constipation relief, and usually it's magnesium citrate or magnesium hydroxide. It's not generally magnesium sulfate that they're taking. It's not normally Epsom salt. But the FDA does approve Epsom salt as a laxative, so technically you can use it if you don't have anything else available to you around the house. But if you're having to choose, normally folks recommend magnesium citrate or magnesium hydroxide, and always make sure that the Epsom salt that you are planning to use is unscented and it is okay to be taken internally. Sometimes the perfumes that they put on them can be really damaging to your body if ingested. Again, poisons are those harmful substances in certain quantities and all that. Now, normally it says you can take it by mouth with water. And remember, this should be the salt itself and not like one of those Dr. Teal's bubble baths. You want this to generally be those flakes. So it will say on the bottle which ones are which. And adults usually are told to take about 2 to 6 teaspoons at a time, dissolved in at least 8 ounces of water, and you're supposed to drink it ASAP. Now, that is what's generally on the package. Remember, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not giving you medical advice. You definitely need to talk to your doctor. But you can expect the laxative to start working anywhere between 30 minutes to 6 hours. So, maybe make sure that you're in for the night when it happens. You might not want to do it on your commute home from the office, just in case something goes sideways with traffic and all that jazz. It could be not a lot of fun. So, wait to take it when you have enough time for it to start. And it could take you 30 minutes, it could take you 6 hours to start. So budget out some time for that. Maybe also have a hot Epsom salt bath while you wait. Up to you. But you can get some unpleasant side effects from eating Epsom salt, and that means you can get liquid stool, you can get diarrhea, and you could also experience some bloating. They also do not recommend this to be a long-term solution. This should only be used occasionally as a laxative. So this is not a long-term solution for folks who are experiencing prolonged constipation. Talk to your doctor about that. Some folks also use it for exercise, performance, and recovery, which is something that helps soothe my muscles. But again, that is right up there with sleep, stress reduction, and relaxation. We don't have any evidence that it's absorbing it through your skin. It's probably just the hot water, at least as far as we know right now, since we haven't really had any studies on it. We do know, though, that having enough magnesium in our body is important because it helps aid our body in the use of glucose and lactic acid, which are important for when we are working out and just having a human body in general. Athletes are also prone to having lower magnesium levels, so doctors often recommend that they take magnesium supplements. So if you are doing a lot of hard work, so you're an athlete, or you work out a lot, or you work doing things with your hands a lot, you move heavy things, stuff like that, then you might want to have your magnesium levels checked with your doctor if you are having trouble sleeping, or you are feeling very stressed, things like that. So doctors will recommend that you take magnesium, but not that you soak in it for exercise performance or recovery. But, if you're already in that hot bath anyway, making it smell nice is not going to hurt. In fact, there aren't any Epsom salt side effects that are found by soaking in it. It's really only deemed to be problematic if you eat it. So if you are using it as a laxative, make sure you drink plenty of water, make sure you talk to your doctor about it too, and if you take too much of it, then you may end up being nauseous, having a headache, being lightheaded, having flushed skin, and if you eat way too much of it, then it can lead to having heart problems, even paralysis, a coma, or death. So that's generally unlikely if you take it in the amounts that are recommended by your doctor or listed on the package according to some scientific studies, but you should be mindful of that and also know that you could have an allergic reaction to it. And if you have an allergic reaction or any serious side effects, you should reach out to a doctor ASAP. Other than that, it's pretty much safe. So remember, again, anything can be poisonous if it is in a certain dosage, including water. Poisons are just substances that are harmful to you, whether that's a whole lot of water or a little bit of lead. Now that we have discussed Epsom salts, and I've been a little bit bummed out by finding out they are not necessarily doing what I think they're doing, I'm going to keep using them anyway. We're going to talk about my experience with telemedicine. So recently, I was not feeling very well, and I had some white spots on the back of my throat, and also my tonsils were swollen. You've had strep before, very likely, and y'all know the drill. Unfortunately, I am in a different state right now from my health insurance program. So my health insurance doesn't work here because it is a hospital employee-based insurance, so it's solely through that hospital system. So it's the whole healthcare system that they have. Now, what that means is that my healthcare is generally pretty well covered if I go to the doctors down there, but it can take a long time to get your appointment. So before I moved, I had made an appointment 3 months out, and when that happened, everything was fine, and then my move date got moved up, and then I had to go ahead and move and forego that appointment. So I figured I would just do it here, but turns out that's not the way it works. Learned a lot about insurance recently. So the problem there is that something that would generally only cost me a $15 copay or something is going to be way more expensive than that, which is a reality I've faced before growing up, being uninsured and stuff. So this was not my first rodeo, but I do also want to point out that it's something that many Americans still live with every day. Even folks who do have insurance are sometimes, like me, having to pay out of pocket for these things due to the limitations of insurance itself, or due to the deductible being incredibly high. It's just not something that allows people to go to the doctor when they need to. So there are a lot more issues with our insurance system than perhaps a lot of folks were aware of. I was not aware that my insurance wouldn't work over here until after I'd moved. But I just want to mention that and make people aware of that as well. There are many different reasons why insured people might even still need to pay out of pocket. And so, to get strep throat to go away, it requires antibiotics. And in order to get them, you have to speak with some sort of healthcare provider. So my ex-boyfriend majored in this kind of thing. That's what his master's degree is in, and he works at this hospital. And so I called him and was like, hey, what are the alternatives to this? Do you know of any way that I can make my insurance work here, etc.? What are some ways that I can approach this problem? And he explained the different options for how these things worked, and also informed me that we had a telemedicine option through the insurance plan and how that worked, and he recommended calling the nurse line and some other stuff. And when those ultimately ended up being super complicated for other reasons that are related to HMOs and everything, and being required to have a designated PCP and a bunch of other stuff, we ended up talking about how you can also often go to pharmacies like Walgreens and CVS and get your healthcare through them at their minute clinics. Now, not all of them offer minute clinics, but some do. It turns out I wasn't able to use my insurance with our telemedicine because the system had randomly let us pick someone who was not actually a practicing doctor. They teach in the university health system, but they are not the actual practicing person. They teach. So it let us pick that person. Never warned us. We had no idea. Moved to a new city and everything, and didn't find out until this past week when it was the first time I needed to actually go see this individual with a telemedicine appointment. So it would not have been covered if I had gone to a different person who is listed in the same practice and is definitely covered by that insurance because they were not the PCP listed. So I was going to have to put through a bunch of paperwork, and it was going to take days to get to that point. So I was like, nope, what's my other option? So turns out, if you have a sore throat, you can go to these minute clinics and get tested for strep by a pharmacist. Many of you may have already known that. I had no idea. They cover a myriad of different things, but I went, and one was like $139 when I looked online, anywhere from $99 to $139 if you don't have insurance that covers it at these minute clinics. And there was also the option of just telemedicine online. And so I found a telemedicine program online, and I was like, is this legit? Is this even possible? I checked to see if it was a scam, because this one was not at all the one that was through my insurance, but it says it was a $35 flat fee out of pocket. And so I went for it. And I did this $35 flat fee and set an appointment online with a doctor who was going to call me first via phone. And if they needed to look at my mouth or my throat, etc., then, they would do a Zoom call afterwards. So I set this up. They asked me about the medications that I'm on, my medical history and everything. I sign in through the MyChart portal, which is really easy and quick to set up, and lots of different doctors' offices use it, including my personal doctor's office that I was not able to actually contact. So you go ahead and put in this information and everything. They call you and they go, I see this is what you're coming in for, and that these are how your symptoms presented. And he was very nice. He was just like, okay, you have the white pustules. Do you feel like you have strep throat? And I said, yes, I've had this like 600 times. And he's like, okay, I will call in the antibiotics for it. This is how you take it. Are you allergic to these types of antibiotics? And I said, no. And he said, what types have you used in the past that have worked for you for this? And I'm like, I used a bunch of different types. What do you think would be most effective for this? And he worked with me to figure that out. I really enjoyed this experience with telemedicine. I also let him know about any other concerns that I might have for this, and he was really quick in talking me through it. It was 5-10 minutes tops. The doctor trusted me to also know my own body and what I needed, and he asked me whether I wanted it, in the pill form or the liquid, etc. And he went ahead and called it straight in. I could see it on my phone within like 5 minutes that he'd called it into the pharmacy of my choice. And also when I got there, it was like $20 for the pharmaceuticals, because he had called it in as being for the generic version and everything too. So that was super awesome. That whole trip cost me $55. I did not have to leave my home to have this conversation. The doctor trusted me and acted as my partner in my journey towards health and wellness, and just went, hey, you are a grown woman. Do you feel like you have strep throat? And I'm like, yes, that's definitely what I have. And went for it. And I really appreciate that about doctors who listen to their patients and act as partners. So if that's something you're looking for in a doctor, go ahead and perhaps try one of these programs. The one that I used this past week was called drsays.com. It is at flat fee. They pre-approve your credit card or debit card for it, and after the appointment, they will go ahead and call it. Now, they're not going to use any controlled drugs, like they're not going to prescribe you any controlled drugs, so you can't get things like Adderall and stuff on there. They can do things like antibiotics and stuff. They also do a lot of common and minor illnesses. They can give you a doctor's note, and if you need labs done, I think there's an option to go to local, like any lab near you, like the brand, and they can go ahead and do those tests and send them in. It's not an ER or anything like that, but it is $35 as a flat fee, even if you do not have insurance, and that's how they charge my card. I've not seen anything fishy on my card since then. Everything else seemed to check out in my research too, and my pharmacy filled it. So overall, it seems legit, and it cost me under $55, or like right at $55, to go and get my prescription and this doctor's visit from the comfort of my home. That was my first visit with telemedicine. I hope that helped you picture what a telemedicine appointment might be like, and also laid out some of those costs for you. So remember, minute clinics were like $99 to $139. plus test, possibly, and the tests are variable depending on where you go, anywhere between $17 and $35, depending on your minute clinic, like if it's a Walgreens or a CVS, etc. And, going and doing telemedicine. So I gave them my personal information. So far, it's all worked out very well for me. That was my experience, and that was only like $55 for strep throat, which is at the very least half of what it would have cost to even go to a minute clinic. I hope my experience has been helpful for someone out there. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.